It's Wednesday night, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Puckdrop Live. Tonight, interesting topic that was voted on, not one that I expected to be selected. But if you're just joining us now, again, let's start this like we always start it. My name is Elias. Welcome to Puckdrop Live, your weekly escape from what's going on in the world to talk about all things hockey. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time tonight, or those of us who are returning, the way this works is I put up multiple topics to vote on each week in a group called Elimination Cafe. Also through our channel We Live Hockey and Hockey Wraparound, which are both simulcasting this live. The audience selects what topic they want me to speak about and interact with them about, and we jump on it. And to start these podcasts, I always, and these live streams, I always riff for a few minutes just to let people kind of come on and make sure that we get a little bit of an audience, so it's just not me talking to myself for 20 minutes. As many of you know, these Facebook Live things work a little weird. But I want to thank you again for joining us. So tonight's topic, before I start the recording of this episode, is a funny one for me. It was put up there, just my stories in the game, my time in the game as a coach, as a player, as an executive, as a business person, fan, adult league player, whatever you want to talk about. And I was actually surprised, really, that got an enormous amount of votes to kind of share the story of my time in the game. It's not something I talk about a lot, to be honest with you. Most of the time, I love to talk. People who know me know that. I have no problem talking. As you know, if you've watched Puckdrop, I can riff for a good hour with little prompting. But I don't talk about my own time in the game that often. It's something that's very uncomfortable for me. But I like a challenge. And for those of you who also know me, know I'm all about challenging myself. So when something makes me uneasy or something that makes me nervous, I try and jump on it because it's a chance for me to grow as a person and so forth and so on. So tonight's topic, as voted by you, is my stories from being in the game. And again, before I start the actual kind of talking about this, I got to text my dad because he was very upset last week that I didn't tell him I was going live again. He likes to listen to these things. So let me just do this. And he's probably listening to this on playback. Hey, Dad, typing this. Going live now on Facebook. See what he says. Maybe he'll actually chat in here once he gets in here. So we got a lot of people joining us. So right away, Mark Pollard from all the way down under in Australia, first one to chat. Good morning to you, because it's morning in Australia. Good evening to the rest of you. Caitlin is here. Ray is here. Jeff is here. All the usual suspects are here, which is great. She says, insert Frost Grump waving from boat. Hi. There you go. All right, he just doesn't want to admit how much stonewalled on him is. So I'm just reading some of your hello comments. But we're a few minutes in. Again, tonight's topic, really a surprise to me. I didn't think people cared that much about my time in the game. Is all going to be my story. So what I usually do when I do a puckcast or puck drop, is I write all these notes. So when we do the NHL type topics, the best of all time, so forth and so on, I write a bunch of notes. I do a little bit of research just so I can have some depth to what I'm talking about, right? So it's not just me talking, right? I like to make sure that stuff's backed up. Part of being a professor, it's part of being a lot of things about who I am. Tonight I had to write notes about stories from the game, and it's funny because they go back in time, and I had to kind of think about some of these. And there's some people on that have been through some of these with me. There's some people on who didn't know me. I mean, I got into hockey sometime probably around 1996, which some of you weren't even born yet. It's weird to say that. Many of you were, to be fair. But I'll be looking at the comments kind of between stories. Please ask questions. This is not an easy topic for me. Ask questions, okay? So the way these stories are going to go also is they're not just funny stories. Like I'm trying to give a little bit of everything: humor, triumph, tragedy, good things, bad things, things that just you can learn something from, hopefully. That's the whole point of these things anyway. And I have a tea tonight. Jasmine tea. There we go. All right. So I'm going to take a quick look at the comments before I get going. Mark says he hadn't figured out that I love to talk. I do love to talk. It's nice to have a couple channels in which I can do that. Okay, let's get going here. When it comes to hockey stories and hockey lives, we all have our own individual presence, journey. Some of them are 6-time Stanley Cup champions. Some of them are 10-time Adult League champions. Some of them are just starting out. It doesn't matter. Hockey journeys are hockey journeys, and we can all learn something from each other by sharing our experiences within the game of hockey. Every story is unique, but they all kind of come back to this same passionate point of a love for the game. And no matter what level you played at, no matter what you've done in the game or who you've done things with in the game. And so as part of Puckdrop Live, what you're listening to right now, every week this simulcast is done on Facebook Live through the channels We Live Hockey, Elimination Cafe, and Hockey Wraparound. And it's also turned into a post-live podcast through We Live Hockey. And every week I ask, what topics do you want to talk about this week? And we put up a poll. And the one that won the poll this week was my stories from my time in the game. And as anyone knows, I love to talk. I do. It's not something that's hard for me, but I don't necessarily love to talk about myself. So I took this on as a little bit of a challenge, as it's something that makes me uncomfortable, and I like to do things that make me uncomfortable because I think it's a way to grow, it's a way to learn, it's a way to experience something new, and I always try and break down those barriers. And even if it's a failure, it's not a failure, right? Because you learn and you grow. And the thing is, I have been playing hockey for 25 years almost at this point, if not longer. So I do have a few stories. So what I want to do tonight is I want to share some stories, but not just the funny ones. I'm going to share funny stories, sad stories, happy stories, triumphant, tragedy, anything that I think had some value in my life that I feel comfortable sharing. And then hopefully through the chat, again, if you're listening to this back on the playback, there's a live chat going on where I can read the comments from the friends that are coming on to listen. We can interact a little bit. So for those of you listening, if you have any questions about what I'm talking about while I'm talking about it, let me know. And we're going to start our stories way back in 2003. All right, I'm going to skip the origin story about how I started in hockey in my youth hockey days. We're just going to go back to 2003 when I was a freshman in college at Montclair State University, which is located in northern New Jersey. Now, my senior year of high school, I was on the fast track. I was being recruited by several ice hockey teams at an NCAA level. I was visiting schools. And in 2002, again, going back one more year, I tore my left shoulder in my third varsity game that year very badly. In fact, I had separated it or torn it 5 times after that night. And it got to a point where my shoulder really wasn't working anymore. I had to get surgery. It was one of the most at that time in my life, one of the most devastating moments in my life. I mean, I remember I had let it come out. The shoulder was this shoulder. I let it pop out multiple times. I had braces on. I had done everything I could to keep playing, but it was starting to come out. Like if I got checked, it would pop out. So I couldn't go that way. So I made the decision my senior year of high school to go get surgery on my left shoulder. I had a torn labrum. I had a really good surgeon, but it was not exactly what I was looking for my senior year of high school. And as soon as this happened, the kind of NCAA teams were out of the picture. There's no way I was going to get out there. But I got the surgery. I recovered rather quickly. I remember during the time, this is when I realized how much hockey meant to me. I was writing articles for a local hockey magazine. I was only 18. I remember practicing. I used to shoot pucks in my garage at home. I remember practicing with one hand. I just couldn't get enough of the game at that time. I loved it before that. I was dedicated before that, but this really showed me that there's nothing that's going to stop me from going. So I rehabbed my shoulder. I didn't get back to playing till the next spring. I mean, the whole season had passed. I had trained so much and done so much. I was pretty much maybe even better than I was when I had gotten injured. The big schools weren't looking at me anymore. So the school up in New Jersey, this little school, recruited me and asked me to come up and play. So I did. I went up to New Jersey. What's funny is, I'd end up meeting some of the most influential people in my life by going to Montclair State, and none of them were in hockey, to be fair. So I went up there. It's 2002, 2003 season, my freshman year. And again, there's so many funny stories from this time period. So the big story for that year is we won the Mid-Atlantic Collegiate Ice Hockey Association championship my freshman year, which was a big deal because the team was struggling before we got there. We had a huge freshman class, if I remember. I think 10 or 11 players were freshmen. Nobody expected us to be a competing team, and we went and we beat 2 teams. And I remember the championship game was actually at a rink in Aston, which is very close to where I grew up. I used to play there when I was growing up, and we won the championship on home ice for me, which was a really special moment. But the things that I remember from that time period was there's two stories. One's funny, one's influential. That's outside of winning the championship. I remember my captain. His name was Ed Caldwell. This is 6'5" dude. This is back in the era where 6'5" and massive was what hockey players looked like. I wasn't small, but I wasn't big. I was probably at that time. I remember when I went to college, I was about 180, 185 pounds. And when I came back, I was about 195. So I'd put on some serious muscle that year. But I remember they were doing an interview with my captain before the game, and I was kind of in the room. They're talking about the playoffs and how we had to get there. And I'll never forget this. They said, what does it mean to be a captain to him, Ed Caldwell? So what does it mean to be a captain? And he said this, and I never forgot this because it was very influential to me. He says, I need everyone on this team to be a captain tonight. It's not just about the guy wearing the C. Everyone on this team needs to be a captain. That's what it's going to take to win. I never forgot that because, I really looked up to this guy literally and figuratively. And when he said that, I realized, look, it's on us too. It's on me too. I have a leadership position, whatever my role is. It's something that would come to define my leadership aspects later on in my life. Now, the funny story from that year was same year, same guy, Captain Ed Caldwell, 6'5", big dude. Big dude, all right? Keep in mind, we're all in college. This is college-age time period, right? People do in college what people do in college. And I remember Eddie and a bunch of the guys on the team lived in this house. I lived in the dorms. I was a freshman. That's what you do. And he lived in this house off campus. And I remember one day he comes in with his bag, and he opens up his hockey bag. And he just starts taking out this kind of like, it looked like hay, just kind of like a nest type material, like a bird's nest. And I remember he took it out, and he's like, well, who's putting stuff in my bag? What is this, some stupid joke? Right? So he's taking the stuff out. 6'5", big dude. And then I looked over, and his eyes got super wide, and he jumped on the bench, like in the locker room. He jumped on the seating bench and was just curled up like this big dude, and out runs a rat. Right out of his hockey bag. A rat just runs out in the locker room. It's running out of the locker room. And like I was joke later on. It's like an elephant and the mouse, right? So this dude just was terrified of rats, I guess. He was super shocked. And what I remember is another guy on the team takes his hockey stick and he pins the rat by its tail. Okay, not hurting it, just pinned it down. For any animal cruelty people out there. And he starts with his stick, like in shooting position, starts looking around the room at all of us, like, who's it gonna be? And he turns towards Eddie, and he goes ready for a wrist shot, and this mouse is just looking around the room. Now, he didn't shoot the mouse at anybody, to be fair. I just remember him being terrified, and I don't remember how the mouse got taken out. Somebody took the mouse out of the room. I don't know what happened to the mouse after that, or the rat. It was a rat, to be fair. Okay, there's plenty of rats up in New Jersey and New York, so we don't need another one, again, for those of you out there. We had a comment, the first time you met Brad Marchand. Yeah, then maybe. Marchand wasn't in the league yet. He was still a kid in 2002. He's probably playing major junior somewhere. No, he's younger. He's probably wasn't even out of Bantams at that time. But yeah, I'll never forget that because it was the other time I thought this guy had no fear, and here was a rat. And he had no fear on the ice, to be fair to him. This guy could fight. I mean, he taught me how to fight, to be honest with you. But I asked him to teach me how to fight. I jumped at him the first practice, and he beat the crap out of me. And I asked him to show me how you did that. I remember that. That was back in the days he went for the biggest guy right in the first day. But yeah, I'll never forget that story because I remember him jump. I can still see him jumping up on the bench, just terrified of this rat. But that was a good year. We won it. I remember the feeling of winning. I remember that feeling. It's something you never forget. The only comparable feeling, which is better, is when a child is born. And I know that from when my kids were born. That triumphant feeling it's a lot bigger than the championship. The kid being born is bigger, but it feels like that, but on a lower level when you win a championship. But yeah, that was Montclair State University. We won my freshman year. We didn't win too much after that, but it was a special time. And then, if we fast forward now to 2005, okay, so during 2005 is an interesting time. This is not a story I talk about publicly too often, and everybody asks me why, but I hate having to say this, but everything I'm about to tell you is true. I say that because it's a little bit of an unbelievable story, all right? But in 2005, the NHL was locked out, okay? And I had aspirations to play at a higher level than college. I was a about 22, 23 at the time, depending on what time of the year it is. And I was training really heavily. I actually had a private trainer that had worked in the NHL training me. I probably learned more in a 6-month period than at any other time of me playing the game. And this is what ended up happening. I was in northern New Jersey. The NHL was locked out. So I'm training with this NHL trainer. I'm going to not give any names out of anybody that I'll give a few names, but there's certain names I'm not going to put out there right now, not to protect the innocent, but just I don't know if those people would want to be mentioned. So I was playing with this New York Rangers trainer. I was playing with one of the greatest players in Penn State ice hockey history from their years in the ACHA. This person ended up playing in the AHL for a little bit. That gives you just the skill level. I was playing with my goalie from Montclair State, and we were training. And there's two stories. I remember one of them was this guy from Penn State had the hardest shot I have ever seen in my life. And I am not talking outside the NHL. I'm talking in the NHL too, and I've been around a lot of NHL games. He had the hardest shot I have ever seen. Okay, I've never seen anything like it. I can't reiterate this enough. And I remember that we were doing this drill where it was kind of a shooting gallery, and he wound up one time, and he took a slap shot, and it hit my goalie just between the eyes. He has helmet on, okay? But it hit him between the eyes, and I'll never forget this because it hit him, and he just froze. He just stood there frozen and didn't move. Just didn't move. And we eventually were like, hey, you all right, man? And he just goes, yeah. And proceeded to just crash headfirst into the ice. Massive concussion. Massive concussion. I mean, he collapsed forward. It wasn't knocked out. He just collapsed. His shot froze him, and he collapsed on the ice. That's how hard this guy's shot was. That's the lower story that I'm about to tell you. This is the story I'm about to tell you that is unbelievable. During this time, the New Jersey Devils, again, not something I talk about often, the New Jersey Devils were still practicing in this area. Again, the school I went to was right down the street from where the Devils played and practiced. So through the connections that we had, we were invited, the three of us, to come train and skate with the Devils at their scrimmages. Okay? Now, as you can imagine, this was a pretty big deal for multiple reasons. So on a personal level, I grew up hating the Devils, severely hating the Devils, okay? Now, here they are all of a sudden asking me to come train with them. So I got to be respectful. I got to know that. And let me just go through this time period. This is 2005, all right? This is right off their 3 Stanley Cups, all right? A lot of these guys are still there. Brodeur is still there. Tommy Abilene is still there. Scott Stevens is still there. John Madden, Jamie Langenbrunner. I think there's others that I'm forgetting right now. And not all of them were playing there. Okay, this was the lockout. So guys like Patrick Elias were back in the Czech Republic. You know, some of the guys had gone home. But I'm there, and I'm skating on the ice with these guys. Right? I go out there. I'm invited out, and I am blown away. Okay, now I'll tell you why I learned more in 6 months at this time than any other time. I skated with these guys for about a month. And every session that I skated with them, I got an education, and I got ridiculously better in an hour or 2 hours just by watching these guys and being on the ice with these guys. That level that they were at was so high, and I'm not even saying I was at that level. It was so high that being out there with them, it was immediate teaching, okay? And when I remember, I skated 4 or 5 times with these guys. I remember the first lesson I learned. So I'm out there with Brodeur. Brian Rafalski was there too, all right, for those of you who know the Devils of the past. And I'll never forget this. Somebody took a shot on Brodeur, and I think I was skating against Brodeur in this game. Someone took a shot, and he made a save. And again, for those of you who remember Brodeur, he made a save, and I was kind of standing by the net, just kind of looking at him making a save. Not starstruck at this point, just looking at him. And he stood up real fast and flicked this puck all the way down the ice to Rafalski, and he's on a breakaway. And I remember that was the moment I understood transition at an NHL level. It was so fast, and I was still looking at Brodeur by the goal line, and the puck was already in the other net. And that taught me this, and I took this with my entire career as a coach, how important transition, and that in my mind, transition is actually the biggest skill that goes through levels. So when you look at the NHL, AHL, ECHL, SPHL, you might be surprised the skill level of these guys is actually not that far off. I mean, when you get to an NHL level, you're talking guys that might be 1 to 2% better than the guys at the AHL level in terms of skill. It's not that much. And at the NHL level, it's 0.1% per player up and down. The difference is transition. When you go to an AHL game, at ECHL, SPHL, the thing that slows down dramatically is the transition game, or the puck going back and forth, switching directions. At the NHL level, it's faster than instantaneous. These guys are already anticipating before the play even happens. That's why they say Gretzky was 5 seconds ahead of the play at all times. So I remember thinking in my head, I got to move. I remember thinking in my head, if these guys get the puck, I got to move. So right away, my transition game maybe tripled in speed, all right, because it's a mental thing, right? You start to realize I got to move. That was the first thing. The next story I remember with Jamie Langenbrunner, I was skating down the ice. Now, to be fair, and again, this is what I like talking about. When it came to the speed, I could keep up with these guys. I was always a really proficient skater. Skating was always my asset when it came to hockey. It was my best skill. It still is, okay? Everything else was a little bit behind that, but I could skate in an NHL speed. And these skating sessions confirmed that. That's when I really knew it. We had suspected it a long time, but I knew at this point, like they weren't beating me in too many races. Let me put it that way. Okay. Sometimes I was getting ahead of them, but I remember this. I was skating with the puck down the ice, and Jamie Langenbrunner, I'm skating down, and he puts his stick blade in my glove as I'm skating and starts taking my glove off, and I lost the puck. And I remember this. I said, like, yo, what was that? And he's, like, not in a bad way. Like, can you show me that? And he's like, well, he showed me the move. So next time he had the puck, I put my stick in his glove. And I remember this because he didn't like that. And he turned around and he slashed me on the leg as hard as he could. He's like, what you doing? I was like, you're doing what you taught me. He's like, don't do it to me. I'll never forget that. That's Jamie Langenbrunner. Okay, the other one, and this is the big story from these things, is Brodor's in net. And I always get the question, did you score on Brodor? So, yes, I did. I scored on Brodor multiple times. I'm going to tell you the story of that, and I'm going to tell you why. This is probably the pinnacle of my hockey career in the most respectful way you can imagine, if you know me, okay? And I remember a couple of the goals, all right? The first one I remember, okay? So I'm coming down the ice, left side. Tommy Albolin is on my line, again, former Devils coach. And I remember he makes the most beautiful cross-ice pass to me right in front of the crease. And I hammered this thing in the net right by Martin Brodeur. All right? And I remember doing that because everything slowed down for a second, okay? And I remember thinking, the first thing I thought was, oh my God, that went in, right, on this guy. The second thing I remember thinking is, you cannot celebrate right now at all. You cannot jump up and down like you want to. And I remember this because I scored, and I remember I was going behind the net, right, like after, the puck went in the net. And so I'm turning behind the net, and I remember that my friend's dad was behind the net, and he was looking at me like, you just scored on Martin Brodeur. And I'll never forget, I remember I went like this. I must have looked just like this. Like, I went, oh my God. Like, as I'm going by the glass, and as I came by the glass, I was like, ah! And I just turned it, I just straight-faced it on the way back. I was excited. I was super duper excited that I'd put one by him. Now, I got to say this, because I always get the question, do you think he was trying? Do you think it doesn't matter at this point? I mean, I put it in. I'll tell you this, that the way this pass was made, which was the real key to this goal, it didn't matter who was in net. It was the type of pass that it's going in the net if you make a good shot, right? Even the best goalie in the world is not going to make, unless he makes an NHL level Stanley Cup Game 7 save there, it's going in the net, which he's done plenty of. I also remember I took a lot of shots on this guy. I believe I scored 5 goals, if I remember, in a month. Okay, this is over lots of scrimmages. There's no refs or anything like that. I remember one time I came in on him, and I scored on a breakaway. And I remember I scored on a breakaway. Again, I don't know how hard Marty was really trying. I mean, he's not a guy that wasn't trying. I can tell you that, but I don't think he was in at a game level. Okay, but I put it in. And I remember John Madden comes to the net. And he yells at Mark, he's a frickin' college kid. He didn't say frickin', but he screamed that. I'll never forget that. And yeah, what I remember is being very respectful and really humble and thankful to even be on the ice with these guys. They didn't have to do that. And again, all of us there it was wowing every time. Now, here's another funny story from that. Okay, and feel free to ask questions about this again, 'cause I know there's a lot of questions. Yes, I have pictures. I do have pictures of me with some of these guys. My dad actually has one framed back at his house. If he's watching, he's probably looking at it right now. So, yeah, Sharp Shack says, don't ask how, ask how many, right? So, here's the deal with Brodeur real quick. When you're playing with NHL players, their job is to set you up into positions where you can score. I was really privileged. I learned a ton from these guys. And again, looking back on it now, these guys are, NHL history. Like these are names of yesteryear, but these guys were really good players. And I learned a few things. One is that I wanted to keep trying to make it to the minors, right? And I thought if I could keep up with these guys on some level, that I could at least try. Okay, I'll get to those stories in a minute. But it's an experience that I'll never, ever forget, being able to skate with the New Jersey Devils, especially Martin Brodeur, and to have even opportunity to shoot on the guy. I'll tell you this too. I remember another story of shooting on him. I came in, I looked up, and I remember I took a shot, and before I took the shot, he was already making the save. And I'd never seen that before. He was already reacting before I even shot. And yes, he saved it. But I remember thinking the speed a mental speed is so far ahead of anything I had seen that when I left skating with these guys, I was a different level player than when I showed up. Every time I showed up, every time I skated with them, I left a immensely better player than when I showed up. That was the benefit of that time. Now, here's a funny story for you. Now, this is a story I love telling. I was a junior in college at this time. A very important year. And I was in TV3. I took broadcasting in college. TV3 is like that pseudo big course that everyone has to pass. It's the nightmare course that you all have to pass. So I'm in TV3 at the same time I'm doing this. And I remember we had a very strict rule. And I've always said that the professors at Montclair State's broadcasting department really taught me how to work in terms of not work ethic. That was from my parents. But in terms of this is how you take yourself to a job and how you really become proficient at a job. So we had a rule that the chair of the department has. If you miss more than 2 classes, you're out of the program if you don't have a good excuse. And it better be, someone has passed away. It's got to be you physically couldn't make it here, you're in the hospital. And they were super strict about this. There was nothing they would accept. And, the Devils asked me to play. So I remember this, all right? The Devils asked me to come out, and I skipped class to do this, okay? And I thought about it before I did it, all right? I remember thinking, I'm not going to get the opportunity to do this again. The Devils are asking me to come out. So I remember I skated with the Devils, and I got home, and I had a voicemail. And it was from the chair of the department. I can still hear his voice to this day. Lee, you have missed another class. You better call me and give me a damn good reason why I should let you back in this program. You are out of the program. Now, this was alarming, scary, and devastating. I love that program, still do. All right, again, that program made me who I am professionally. All right, and this is I just got kicked out of college, essentially that level, right? So I was panicked. Now, again, I was a junior. I had a really good relationship with my professors. So I remember this, ran over to the department. Still lived on campus. Ran over there to go talk to one of my advisors. And I remember her name is Patty. Again, she says to me, come in my office, sit down right now. And I'm like, oh no, this is really bad. I'm really in trouble here. I'm going to tell my parents I got kicked out of the program, all this money. Oh my God. So she sits me down, and she had this angry look on her face, or I should say straight look, just, looking at me. And she says to me, did you skip class to play with the Devils? It's just like that, right? And I go, yeah, I did that. I did it. I'm looking around her office. There's little bobbleheads everywhere. And she goes, you skipped class to play with the Devils. What was that like? So I'm thinking it was really amazing. This guy was there, Brodeur was there. She had Brodeur bobbleheads, and all the bobbleheads in the room were there. I'm telling her about it, and she's like, yeah, that's really cool. It's amazing you had that opportunity. And I'm sitting there yeah, it's really amazing. So am I kicked out of the department? And she's like, oh, you'll be fine. And I remember thinking I remember at that moment I was put my guard down for a quick second. And then I remember that I said, well, what do I got to do? She's like, well, you still got to talk to the chair. His name was Larry. Okay. Super hard ass, best thing that I could have gotten at that age. Okay. I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I'm going to get this. And I remember I talked to another professor and he's like, yeah, it's really great. You shouldn't have missed class, but it's really great. I'll never forget that. I walk into Larry's office and it's like, it's like out of a movie. Like there's a corridor and it opens up in this big office. And there he is just sitting at his kind of desk table, mustache. I remember this. He's kind of got this, he was pissed. He's like, come sit down. I go, okay, Larry, I'm going to sit down. And he said to me, why'd you miss class? And I told him what happened. And he says, Lee, listen. He goes, I know you really love hockey, but you have swear to God, you have a real future in broadcasting if you want to do it. It's just funny because I'm doing this. And he goes, you really have a lot of promise, but you cannot do this. I don't know how I can let you back in. And I was like, well, and this is what I told him. I said, Larry, look, I love this program, but playing hockey is my dream. And I said, I have to pursue my dream. I can't not pursue my dream. And he said, I remember this. He says, do you know what the chances of you playing professional hockey are or making it to that level? And I said, yes. And I said, but I am. And I said, when I do make it, I will send you a photograph signed of me playing at some professional level. And I don't remember the rest of the conversation too well, but I do remember that he let me back in the program. And essentially it was, if you miss any more classes, like, I'm not helping you. And I remember he said to me, your project, the final project, it better be good. I'm bragging now. I got an A on it. But listen, it was a learning moment for me in a lot of ways. One is that, and this is the beauty of college, for those of you in college or younger. In college, you can get away with stuff like this. In the real world, you don't get away with stuff like this. You do get fired. But they knew me well enough, and they knew the time that I was putting in at both to know that I was scared. I had learned my lesson. I'll always give them credit for that, for knowing me well enough to understand that. And that, the praise that he gave me about that I had a future really meant a lot to me. I wasn't cocky about that. I had never heard him say that, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. Up until that moment, this was not a man that threw compliments around. So for him to say that really meant a lot to me. But I don't look at it like I won the situation. I look at it like I was lucky in that situation. They let me back in, and I continued. I still have a good relationship with these guys. Now, the story you're wondering is, did I ever send him a picture? I did, and I'll show you that in a minute. My father, who's just messaged on here, for those of you listening, apparently just sent over the picture, and he did. He just texted me the picture, which I almost accidentally deleted, of me with some of the Devils. So I'll bring it up here and I'll put it on the camera. So you're going to see a much younger me here with a lot of hair, although I have a hat on. But I'm looking at this picture: Jamie Langenbrunner, John Madden, Tommy Abilene, and some goalies. And me, I'm the guy in the blue here. Let me see if I can get that up there. It's probably not going to be too clear on the camera. If I bring it up, maybe bring it up closer. No, it's still blurry. But you can see there's a picture there. I don't know why it's not focusing for you. Of me with them. And there it is. Okay. So as you can see, that's a much younger version of me. I'll probably never post this online, so this is your only chance to see it. Caitlin, I can already see you thinking screenshot, so I'm going to pull it away. They're saying I had hair. I had a lot of hair at that time. I had hair down to my shoulders at that time. That's what hockey players looked like in the turn of the century. Drew, for those of you asking. Drew Brewer, thanks for coming on tonight, by the way. Also, some of you other Casey's here. Casey Owasco, friend of everything that we do here. How did Marty feel about getting scored on? I don't think he liked it, Drew. His old players were ragging him about it. I don't think I'd want to get scored on if I was a college kid. To be fair, super nice guy in the locker room. Didn't have a problem with that at all. And he was a good guy. I mean, all those guys were awesome. I asked him for pictures. They understood what was happening, and they were really cool about it. And I think the biggest thing about the Devils skates were that I kept getting invited back. And I think that looking back on it now is a really big deal for me. Just, as a player, I'm very prideful of the time that I played. They would have asked us back if we weren't contributing in some way. I don't know if they thought we were pylons or not, but even at the NHL level, you don't invite just pylons back, right? So I thought that was a pretty big deal. Caitlin wants to know if she can use that pic for a thumbnail. No, you can't. It will remain in my father's house. It is his trophy. All of my trophies that I ever won, and there's plenty of them, are in the room that my father's probably listening to this live in right now. He's probably laughing about that. But as I'm a father now, I'm actually very happy that they're there. I've never been big on keeping trophies with me. In fact, I'm in my office right now. The only thing I have in my office, I've talked about this before, with all the championships, I only have pictures of the team winning. Those are my trophies. I really mean that. I would show you. I'm looking at least 4 of them right now. But I like pictures of me with the group, with the team. That's my trophy. The moment of victory, or the moment of togetherness. That's kind of what I pride myself on. But I'm happy that my father has those trophies and awards at the house. Me and my brother, who's also heavily awarded in many things, who also is my brother, my father, my mother were so influential for me. I was the youngest child in my family, and I benefited greatly from being the youngest. My brother really led the way for me in terms of, like, I watched him diligently, and he hates when I talk about this, but he was 5 years older than me, and I watched everything he did in high school and college and beyond. And I wanted to be like him and succeed like him. If he had not paved that way for me, I wouldn't have done the things that I had done in my life, probably including having the guts to go skate with the Devils. Again, my brother, and then my father and my mother. My father's work ethic was incredible. I remember my dad telling me how prideful he was to have a job when he was younger, as a kid. Like when he was telling me about it. That really impacted me about the worth of work. And the effort and all those things, and that I'm not owed anything, right? Like you got to work for it. That was something that was influential. And then my mother, who has beaten cancer multiple times and was a midwife, and her work ethic and her upbringing, and then my grandparents. I could keep going on here about my family. I benefited greatly from having unbelievably good mentors, unbelievably good family situation. Fortunate to grow up when I did, how I did, where I did. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those people. I have to say that, even though I talk about a lot of hockey stuff. It's not just because I've told my dad this many times, but it's not just because he's listening. All right, I've been blessed, and I know it, and that's why I like to give back as much as I can. All right. So after the Devils and almost getting kicked out of my program, I had my chance to try out. I played in 2 exhibition games for an SPHL team. And I trained my whole life for this, and I'll never forget this. The first game I go out there, and I scored a goal, and I remember thinking, as the puck went in the net, I remember thinking, did that just go in? I can remember thinking, I know where I was on the ice and everything. And then I remember gaining some confidence. I started putting some assists up. I scored another goal in the next exhibition game. I was like banging home. I was getting it really ready to go. I remember that, and again, this is 2005, 2006. So you have to understand the SPHL, which is the league I was trying out for at this time, is not the SPHL today. This is a fighters league at that time. Remember, the NHL lockout had not changed the rules of hockey towards speed and skill yet. Things were still very much a rough league. And I remember in this tryout, I I hit someone in front of the net really hard. It wasn't a cross-check. And he went down hard. And I remember thinking, like, he's going to fight. Let's fight. We got to fight. And he didn't take his gloves off. I remember that. I'll tell you why in a minute. So 2 exhibition games. I had 2 goals, 3 assists. I was really satisfied. The best players that were there with me were talking to me. And in my life, I had never played on the same team twice until I got to college because I was jumping up levels every year. I started playing hockey really late. I was 12 when I started playing. I wasn't 6 or 5. And so for the top players to be talking to me was really like, I was kind of like, wow, maybe I did something good here. And I remember we had a meeting with the coach, and the coach said to me, listen, we're going to put you on the bubble, which I was shocked at. And he's like, we'll give you a call in a couple of weeks. We're going to look at our options. And, I was like, all right, cool. Right. Like I was like, wow, I made the bubble. Most of the guys didn't get that. So a couple of weeks go by. I remember thinking, like, this is a weird situation because I'm about to go to my senior year of college. Do I leave college to go play? If they say yes, what do I do? I'm thinking about it. There's no, and I remember I got the call, and they said, you did a really good tryout, but, you didn't fight, and we're looking for someone who can fight. And I remember thinking that, wow, that's an interesting thing, considering what I output point-wise. But I said, I remember I had the wherewithal. I said, thank you so much for the opportunity. I did tell him I was willing to fight, but it was, kind of too late at that point. I remember I was just really gracious, great. I was really grateful for the opportunity, and I meant that. I went through like a 2-hour depression, and then I came out of it. I remember thinking about how awesome this was that I had the chance to do this. And I made the decision that, I was going to finish college at that moment. Because here's the deal with the SPHL at that time. You might get $500 a week, maybe, not really any medical insurance. And they're expecting you to beat the crap out of yourself every night. And at the time, I didn't think I was going to get much further than that. I mean, I barely made the bubble. That's how I looked at it. So I made this decision: I'm going to finish college, and after college, maybe I'll go back and try out again. This is where things shift for me. As I take a sip of my tea. Okay, so I finished college, and I'm thinking about training again, maybe going back to try out. I didn't do bad. Then a funny thing happened. I was out of college. I got a really good job as a producer in television, which is not something you get right out of college. So I took that. I would find out later, which is hilarious to me, that they didn't know how young I was when they hired me. They thought I was like in my late 20s. I was only 22, 23. But that jump-started my television career, my professional career. But a year after college, my college team, Montclair State, was in hell. And I was told that there was drugs, there was alcohol, there was probation. The team was in trouble. They were going under, and no one wanted to coach them. Nobody. The coach was let go. It was a coachless team, and the school was like, we're probably just going to get rid of the program. Well, here comes rambunctious 22-year-old me, and I go in there, and I said, look, I think I can coach this team. I was out of the blue. I said, I think I know exactly how to coach this team so they'll win again. And I remember getting asked questions. Why do you want to do this? What's the point? Like the team's not doing well. What is the real reason you want to do this? I remember getting that, which I never understood. Like, what is it so you can be with college again? You want to get with the girls? I remember being asked that, and I was like, I just wanted to coach the team because I knew how to fix the team. But yeah, I remember that. I got the job. All right, 22, got the job, and again, this is another podcast, but I got to work immediately, and I can tell you this: I just knew what to do. In terms of, I knew the path we needed to go down to get there. So I'm a very raw version of myself at this time as a coach. I would, mature into that role years later. But I really this is the first time I started implementing team bonding and practices and discipline. And I just did it the way I wanted to do it. I ran it like an NHL team, essentially. All right. And that team went from the year before I got there, they were 5-25. 5 wins, 25 losses. My first year there, we were 25-5 regular season play, and we missed the national championship tournament. We lost in the semifinal game to get there. The next year, we lost in overtime in the same game, but the program completely turned around. And this is when I started realizing maybe I have a chance at coaching. And I remember thinking I'm a better coach than I am a player. I remember thinking that, and that's when I decided that coaching was something I wanted to do. Now, for those of you, here's a funny story. I remember for that year, I always like to throw a funny story there. I remember we were on the road in, I want to say we were up in, it was either Massachusetts or New Hampshire. I can't remember. But we played a prank. I was young. Yeah, remember, I was like 22, 23, 24. And some of my players are 1 year younger than me at this time. That's what was happening. And I remember we played a prank because I would still do that with the guys. I always maintained that I was the coach and stuff. And it was very well respected with most of the players that, I'm not a player here, right? But I remember we were on the road, and I was all about team bonding, so we stuffed the smallest player on the team in a hockey bag, and he fit. And we dropped the bag off, and it was cold, in front of one of the doors of one of the captains, and they knocked on the door, and they came outside, and the bag is sitting there, and they were like, what's this bag? And then the kid in the bag, voluntarily, he was in there, started kicking and punching the bag. They had no idea if there's a wild animal or what, so they're terrified opening the bag. Finally open the bag, the kid comes, he falls out, and then the whole team pelted this guy with snowballs. I'll never forget that. It was a really funny moment. I was laughing. There's a video of it, and you can hear me laughing like a hyena in the background, but I love that because it was a cool team bonding, and I didn't mind getting involved in some of those things. I'd probably be classified as more of a strict players coach, if that makes sense. But anyway, here's what happened. I'm also working at the NHL at this time. The NHL was a very interesting place to work at. I've talked about this in other episodes that I worked there. I was the coordinator of the NHL Network. I helped get it launched in the United States. Again, I'll put this up as a topic about working at the NHL. This is what I'll tell you about the NHL. I was incredibly honored to work at the National Hockey League. And yes, guys like Gary Bettman were walking around, and I'd see these very influential people walking around the league in the offices. But I'll tell you something. The work was great. The atmosphere of being there was incredible. I was working in Midtown Manhattan. I walked through Times Square to get to work every day. They gave me cars home every night. It was a dream and sort of the professionalism. But the people I worked with were not the best people. And it might surprise you that probably half the people that worked at the NHL then, I can't speak to now, did not care about hockey. It was a job. And I'm not talking like the lawyers and these are people in production. They just didn't care. And it's New York City, so there's a lot of backstabbers in New York City. Or as I used to joke, there's a lot of front stabbers. They'll look at you. And it was a really stressful and a really hostile environment. And I did fine there, but I was getting depressed. I'm not going to lie to you. I was going through a lot, and I was starting to get depressed. And that's the moment I realized that it's not what you do, it's who you do it with. So here I am at the mecca of professional hockey, and I'm starting to become miserable with my life because the people are not great. And I don't want to say I was young at the time. I'm sure I contributed to this too. I wasn't perfect in terms of a person, but I was honorable. All right. I never tried to screw anybody over ever. And I still haven't to this day. It's just not in my nature. It never will be. It's one of the reasons that I'll never go back to New York. But it was a great experience to be there. I did some amazing work with some amazing people. There are some people there that were amazing to me. Okay. A man there named Dan, I'll never forget, when I was leaving there, told me, just dare to be great. And I never forgot that. Just dare to be great, whatever you do. I never forgot that. I still talk to him to this day. But yeah, it was a really weird environment being around people who didn't care, or worse, didn't like hockey. And that was a daily thing, and that was shocking to me. And what happened was, in 2009, this is right after the economy fell completely, I got laid off, right? And a lot of us got laid off. It wasn't just me. I don't want to make it. A lot of people got laid off at the NHL. And I'll never forget this. I've never shared this before, I think, publicly. But I remember I was in the HR room. I remember this because a friend of mine, Phil, got laid off that morning, and he told me. So when I got the call from HR a little later in the day, I knew what was about to happen. And I was lucky again because it gave me at least a minute to prepare mentally, right? It wasn't like I didn't know what I was walking into. So I went up to the HR room, and the head of HR and the head of the broadcast department's up there. And it was really, I don't know if any of you have been laid off before. It was just, hey, listen, we're terminating your position. They did have the grace to tell me that I had done nothing wrong and that this is purely a business move, and that today's your last day. And I remember, again, and it's funny how things come back. I remember telling them I really appreciate the time I've worked here. It was an honor to work at the NHL, and I really meant that. And that if I'm ever invited back, it would be unbelievable, and that just thank you for letting me be here for the years that I've been here. And I remember two things. I remember the HR manager started crying. And I remember thinking, I was fine up until this moment, but I remember thinking, why the hell are you crying? I'm the one getting laid off. I remember that. And then I remember walking downstairs and getting ready, just kind of packing my things and getting ready to leave. And I remember that I told Dan, the guy I was talking about a minute ago, I said, look, they just laid me off and this is happening. And Dan took his phone, the office phone, threw it across the room and said this. And this is one of the most, I don't know the word I want to use here. This meant something to me. I'll put it that way. That NHL at the headquarters throws his phone across the room and says, these bastards just fired the best fan we've ever had working at the NHL. He's the biggest hockey fan we've ever had. They can fire him. Or laid him off. I didn't get fired. There's a difference. And I was like, Dan, stop. You're going to get yourself fired. He was pissed. But I never forgot him saying that I was the biggest hockey person that worked there. I didn't know that until he said it. And that meant something to me. And left graciously. Now, what ended up happening here, and Drew, I see your question. I'll answer it in a minute, was very shortly after this, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was in the Air Force. She was joining the Air Force to become a doctor. And it was during this time period. It was a very low time in my life. I wasn't coaching. I didn't have the league. I had nothing. I had lost legit everything professionally I had. I was on the top of the mountain and it was gone. It was during this time period that I realized I wanted to marry my future wife. So I proposed to her not too long after that. I was really able to clarify and where I wanted to go with this. And I remember thinking, I'm going to get back into hockey, and I'm going to get back to where I was and go farther than I ever have. I remember thinking that at the time. I had nothing. It could have been so easy just to walk away and end up doing another job. So the Air Force calls my wife and says, hey, you're going to come to Pensacola, Florida. Hockey hell, right? Or just the panhandle of Florida. So we went to Florida. And that's where the next half of the story begins. So Drew asked, did you meet any other players while you worked there? There's too many to tell you. I can tell you Messier. I can tell you a quick funny story about Messier and Dan, actually, the guy I was talking about. There were players there all the time, every day. They were just, legit walking amongst all the officials, all the players. Everybody was there all the time. Also, for those of you who ever watched, you might remember a show called NHL Live. I directed that show for 2 years. It was it was a radio show on NHL Network, but it was also simulcast on TV. I directed that show. So I was in the NHL store at the time, powered by Reebok, every day, working on that show with Don LaGreca and EJ Radick. I just saw EJ Radick not too long ago, actually. I loved my work there. I can't tell you that. Every day was hockey. But again, it's all who you work with. This is why I've said before that I realized during this time, and Ray Carcillo, who's watching, Ray Carcillo is my best friend in the world. He is as much a brother to me as my brother, my actual brother. And I remember really that time I said to him, I'd rather be a garbage man, which is nothing wrong with being a garbage man, with you, so we can hang out all day being garbage men, than do what I'm doing right now. That's how toxic of an environment that league was at the time. With personnel, I can't stress enough, I'm not talking the work. I love the hockey work, but the people were rough. And that's when I realized it doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're doing it with good people. And with that said, every job is respectable, as long as it's not illegal. All right. Ray's commenting, he remembers that, but that's true to this day. All right. I'd rather be with him doing a job than doing something I hate. And that's why good time to mention, we have another podcast called Geeks Who Like Sports. It's just growing rapidly every day. So if you like geek stuff and sports stuff, you should listen to that. Plug. All right. So, the quick story about Messier is I remember Dan, the guy I was telling you about the NHL, huge Rangers fan, huge. And for those of you who are not from New York, Mark Messier is a god to Rangers fans. He's a god generally, but he's a god to Rangers fans. And I remember that we were in an elevator. We knew Messier was in the building because he was trying to promote his helmets that he was making at the time. And I told Dan, we're in the elevator going down. And I don't know how I did this, but I said to Dan, when we get to the bottom, the doors are going to open and Messier is going to be standing there, right? And he's like, yeah, whatever. That's not going to happen. Get to the bottom, the doors open, Mark Messier staring right at us, right? And I'll never forget this because I remember thinking, oh, my God. And I remember Dan, this is all Dan. This is Mark Messier, the Messiah, the man who has predicted that the Rangers are going to come back. He scored a hat trick. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? Right? Stanley Cup champion. He brought it back to New York. And this is what Dan does. Hey! Never forget that. And this is the cool part. Messier just goes, hey! They pass each other. And that was it. That was it. The door closed, Messier went up, and that was it. That's all that happened. But you got to remember too, Messier does this 100 times a day. It was amazing to me. And again, I've seen Messier so many times since that. I've seen Messier at least 3 times since this. I've interviewed Messier. It's weird. It's weird the way the hockey world is so small. I just did a documentary with We Live Hockey, this channel, with Messier in it. So it's very, very weird. So that was an amazing story. I'll never forget that. I remember I was standing next to Gary Bettman at one time. I was surprised how small he was. Not a tall man. I was taller than him. So it's very weird when you're next to Gary Bettman, the commissioner of the NHL, who you see on TV and he's standing in cups, and you're taller than him. It's a surreal feeling when you're just kind of like, there he is. I will tell you this too. Again, totally different podcast. But I learned a lot about the business of hockey when I worked at the NHL. And I am not a Bettman hater, albeit many people are. That's another topic for another time. But Gary Bettman has done more for hockey, not all of it good, but he's done more for hockey than probably any other human being in his position. I'm not talking about Gretzky's and players. Gary Bettman has done a lot for hockey, a lot more than people realize. Again, another topic for another time that I'd love to debate. Honestly, I love debating the business side of things because I really see a lot of things. Right? Drew says he's got little man syndrome. Maybe he does. All right. But yeah, a lot of people. Bill Daly. I mean, everyone. I just met everyone. I met the guy. I knew the guy that made the schedule every year. I used to watch him make the schedule. And then you can imagine the broadcast side of the people coming in and out. It was an amazing experience. Okay. So anyway, back to the story. We're I don't want to go for 3 hours tonight. We end up in Florida. The long story short in Florida is I played in a league called the ECIHL down there. These are my mid to late 20s, so I was playing really good at that time. I was still young enough, and I was growing enough that I was actually getting better still. But it wasn't a professional option. I was working down there at the time. I was in graduate school. In that league and those people down there, I still have friends from down there that influenced my life, my life, excuse me. And then this is why I'm crossing that. My first child, we found out that my first child, Logan, was going to be coming towards the end of our time there. I also remember this too. I've never talked about this publicly either. There's a team in Pensacola in the SPHL called the Pensacola Ice Flyers. And I wanted to try and get on their executive board or team. And I was even willing to quit my job and work for free. I was trying to get back in the game. I was in graduate school for sports management, was ready to get back in. And I wrote up an entire media plan on how to rebuild this team, okay? Because they were not doing awesome at the time. Their media sucked. It just sucked. All right, so I had this whole plan about broadcast and everything. And I wrote it all up, and I had it in a packet. And I remember, and I swear to you, this was premeditated. I said, I'm going to give this to them. And they may steal it, okay? But I got to try, right? So I wasn't established anything at this point outside my time at the league. So I gave it to them. They stole it. They implemented it without me. It worked to a T, right? And I remember this. I remember people being very upset for me that because they knew I had done it. I'd showed it to people before. Like, how do you just let them take it? And I remember thinking this. And again, I don't think I'd be this way today, but I remember back then I was like, yeah, but it worked. I remember thinking that. Yeah, but it worked. It worked. Like the plan worked. Look what's happening. It's working. Because I needed that. I needed to see it work. I didn't know if it was going to work, right? So real quick, and I'm really not trying to plug this. All the ideas from that went into what I wrote at the time, which this is some of you might not know this. I'm an author, right? So I've written a couple books. This was the first book I wrote, and this is based on that plan. Now, what's cool about this book is it was a rudimentary point at that time. I wasn't thinking about writing a book. The Air Force calls, and they go, hey, you're going to move to England. I'm going, England? What do they know about hockey in England? Well, luckily enough, I knew someone in England. His name was Tom. Still a good friend of mine to this day. He's in the Air Force too. I had met him in Florida when we were in the Air Force. My wife was in the Air Force. And he was in England, and he said, look, there's hockey over here. So I said, that's good enough for me. Get me out of hockey hell, panhandle of Florida. Florida, just real quick, some of the most beautiful beaches I've ever seen in my life, ever. All right, but this is the deep, deep south. They used to call it L.A., Lower Alabama. And it was not my speed for that time of my life. I didn't hate my time there. I'm not complaining about my time there. It was time. I got a lot of stuff done when I was down there. Again, I got married when I was down there. A lot of great life events happened when I was down there. But it's not a place that I, to this day, want to go back to outside vacation. So we go to England, United Kingdom. Dun, 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 dun. Cue all your international time things there. Yeah, ground control to Major Tom. That's what Drew Brower just said, so I had to sing it. I'll spare you the rest of that song. Get to England, and before I get there, there's a team there. There's a professional league. There's two professional leagues in England. There's the Elite League, which is the top professional league, and then there's also the English Premier League, which is kind of just a tier down. It's about ECHL level league, and I'm talking to one of the teams near where I knew we'd be stationed. And they invited me over when I moved there to just interview, kind of to see if there's a media position open. I was doing more media at the time than anything else. And I go in there and essentially go, look, I've got the plan. I know it works. You want an American on your team. So very graciously, they brought me on. Just really without asking too many questions, they brought me on. And I remember driving home from the rink almost hyperventilating because I'd really been waiting. You have to understand, this is the first time I've had a hockey job now since I left the NHL. And we're talking 4 years later, maybe more. All right? Actually, it's more, yeah. So from a media standpoint, that team had a great media team that was being underused. They had great people. I know some of them are going to listen to this. Matt Cavalieri is one of them, who's a great friend of mine still to this day, but I never would have been able to implement half the stuff that I did when I was over there as director of media for game night operations. I worked with a woman named Carrie Buckman, who has mentored me as a parent as much as she did as a person at that time. She was really in charge of marketing for the team at the time. Dan Breen. I mean, there's a whole team of people there that were working really hard. And we really came together and just redid the entire Peterborough Phantoms, that was the name of the team, approach to marketing. Now, let me tell you something. This team sucked at that time. All right. They were second last in the league. I was watching the games thinking, man, I wouldn't have done that. I remember thinking that if I was coaching, I would have done this. A lot of things, a lot of just hockey mistakes. It wasn't a good team in terms of the way they were playing hockey, but the media team was great. And I remember we turned that attendance around from almost nobody to a full building that year when they sucked. I remember that. And we did so many fun things. A lot of the ideas that came by that actually turned into what We Love Hockey would eventually be. But that book I showed you a minute ago was all the tactics that we did to do that. Now, I'm going to keep going here because, like I said, I don't want to keep you guys on here for 17 hours. That end of that season, the new coach came in. Right, the coach on the team left, and the new coach came in. His name was Slava Kulikov. I'll never forget this because there's some really cool stories here. And after the season ended, I asked him to interview to be an assistant coach. I was ready. I knew it. I knew I could help coach this team. And I won't go into the details of our meeting because that's private. But I'll tell you that I convinced him that we could bond this team, and I could take any group of players with him, and we could win a championship. That's the goal, to win a championship. Team was horrible, so I want to win a championship next year. And he hired me, and he used to call me the American Experiment. Now, Slava Kulikov, his father, Alexander Kulikov, played on the Soviet B team in 1980. Okay, so he played against Team USA. I'll tell you why that's funny in a minute. So he hires me, and now I'm doing media, and I'm doing the team. And it's 2014-15. It would turn into be probably the greatest hockey year of my entire life for multiple reasons. So I am thrilled that I'm coaching again. I'm my team bonding. I'm doing assistant coaching skill development. I'm working with the guys. So much is going on, and we're winning, man. We're winning games, right? This team is now the shock of the league. Nobody expected us to be in the top 10. There's only 10 teams. I'm joking here. We're consistently in the top 5. In fact, I don't think we ever dipped below 4 that year. Long story short, again, with this season, we go all the way. We win the championship, the playoff championship that year. To this date, as a hockey player or coach, is one of the greatest days of my life, winning that championship. Actually, the 5-year anniversary of that just passed a few weeks ago. And they just broadcast the game live on Facebook a few days ago. It was one of the greatest seasons in my life to watch this team of guys, 3 brothers on the team, the Ferrara brothers. The team came together, bonded, and spit in the face if anybody said they couldn't win, and they won. And it wasn't always easy. Again, at the beginning of the season was really rocky, and then we just rose up, and just nobody was going to tell these guys they couldn't do it. In addition to the team, the fans. I was really close with the fans. This is what makes this special, is because I've been doing marketing. So I've been interacting with fans for 2 years. And the bond that we had with the fans as the team, the bond I had with the fans as the marketing, and vice versa, was a really special time period. This team had not won in 10 years. Anything. Nothing. Not even close. So I remember that. I also know at that time a guy who listens to these podcasts regularly, Jeff Dwyer, who's commenting probably as I speak about him, really got himself into the team as a fan. And he used to help with the day-to-day operations, cleaning visors and helping with the equipment manager. He'd do anything to be closer to the team, which we loved. And he also had this persona called the Dancing Trojan. He used to put a Trojan's helmet on and dance at the game in a kilt. The fans loved it. The team loved it. And that was special for him because I remember he and I really got to know each other at the time. He used to drive me back and forth to the rink because we lived on the same base. He was in the Air Force. He's a proud veteran of the U.S. Air Force. So, I never would have made it to the rink. That's something I should tell you. The rink was at least an hour and 15 drive to and from, and I was getting there maybe 3 to 4 days a week, and it was a drag. These drives sucked. And I was also playing on a men's league. I used to help coach the Royal Air Force team over there. So I'm at the rink all the time, and it's just, 3 to 4 hours on the road a day. But that was the love of the game, right? That was the love of the game. Also in 2014, right before we won the championship, my son was born, which was the greatest day of my life. All right, the day my children were born, the greatest days together of my life. It's just special year, man. I had a son. I won a championship. It doesn't get much better about that. So I have to say this too. Again, not a plug. That's when I wrote this, this is the I'm actually showing you this more for the picture. This is James Ferrara, the captain of the team, who just actually retired. That's the moment we were given the trophy for winning the 2015 championship. And I wrote this book is my personal coaching philosophy about how to bond a team. And I have a whole, business built on this about team bonding. This is what I do outside of the stuff you guys see me on. I work with teams to bond them. But that's the moment we won. I also love this shot. This guy's name is Will Weldon. And every time he wins, he accidentally sprays champagne in his eyes. For those of you who don't know, champagne burns like hell. So that's him realizing that champagne burns like hell. Great moment. Unbelievable team. I have a huge picture of it on the wall over here. Jeff and I are still friends. One of the defining moments of my life. I can't tell you again how fortunate I am to have a moment like that. Not everybody gets to experience something like that. It was broadcasted. I mean, it was 10,000 people more when we won. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable, and it was outside of my children and my wedding day, the greatest day of my life. Can't tell you any more with that. Back to Slava Kulikov. So that season, his father, Alexander, came to coach with us. So now I've got these 2 Russian, Ukrainian guys and me, an American. Now, for those of you who know me, the greatest story I love to tell is the 1980 Olympic team winning at Lake Placid against the Russians. So here's the thing. You can't really tell that story when there's a guy in the room that was on the USSR team. You can't do it. It's not a good memory. You don't want to talk about it. I don't want to insult the guy, and it would have been insulting. These USSR guys don't like to talk about that. So here I am. I can't use the greatest story in the world to tell these English guys. Not that they would have wanted to hear another U.S. story anyway. They're very proud. The English people are very proud about their history, and they should be. All right, so I had to find workarounds to get these guys motivated with the underdog mentality without using that. And I remember telling them, in England, in Europe in generally, the biggest championship you can win in a European league, not just hockey, in any league, soccer, rugby, is the league championship, which is essentially the President's Trophy here, the best team at the end of the season. And I remember telling these guys in a meeting, I know that's a big deal here, guys. I know it is. Where I come from, the Stanley Cup is all that matters. And I said, I want you to start having that mentality about this team with the playoff championship. And, they ended up doing it. And I told the guys a quick story. I'll tell the story really quick. I've told it before about Wayne Gretzky, about how when he lost the cup, this is maybe one of the cooler speeches I gave, but I talked about when Gretzky lost the cup to the Islanders in '83, he didn't want to walk by the Islanders locker room. In Nassau Coliseum, you have to walk by the opposing team's locker room because he didn't want to see them celebrating with the cup. And again, I'll make this short. He walks by the room. He had to. He looks in, and they were all there with ice packs, and the cup was in the middle of the room, and they were hurting. And he said that's when I realized what it would take to win, that he could have kept playing. He realized he'd have to have nothing left to win the cup. And I remember I told that story, and after the championship, and I didn't know if anybody had heard me really listening in the locker room, Will Weldon, this guy right here, I'll never forget, this guy right here, the guy exploding the champagne in his face, came up to me exhausted, and he says, dude, you remember that story you told us? Because I had said, I challenge you not to be the Oilers. I challenge you to be better than Wayne Gretzky. That's what I said. I challenge you to be better than Wayne Gretzky and win now. And he came up to me and said, you remember that story you told us about how tired he was and he had nothing left? He goes, I've got nothing, man. We did it. I'll never forget that. It was a really cool moment for me. So fast forward, 2016. This is the short part of the story. 2016, 2020, moved back to the United States. I'm in Delaware for a year. We Live Hockey was created in Delaware. Hockey Wraparound, my other company, was created in England with Matt Eastman, a really good friend of mine, another brother, right before we were leaving England, so the 2015, 2016 time period. Game 7 Group, which is where all the books and stuff, all the teaching I do, all the consulting that I do, the team building, was developed during that time. Those of you who know Blade Shades, which is hockey stick sunglasses. Again, I'm not trying to promote, but all that stuff was created over the last 3 years, some of them more recently than others. And I still play when we're allowed to play. And my daughter was born in 2016, Alina, and my family lives in Philadelphia now. And, I run my businesses. I help coach. I work with a lot of different sports teams. I'm still playing hockey. That's kind of the end of the the stories there. I mean, Travis, you should know this. So Travis comes into my life. Here's the last story I'll tell you. It's 2016. Yeah. No, 2017. Excuse me. It's 2017. No, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. It's 2016. I apologize. It's 2016, and I'm in Delaware, and I go to open hockey. And this may surprise a lot of you, but when I end up in a new location after the military, which is not going to happen again, I'm usually very quiet. I don't talk a lot because I'm trying to read the room. I'm the new guy. I don't want to go in there and explode. So I skated a few times with these guys in Delaware. And this kid, I'll never forget this. He's not even listening. You should tag him. You should tag Travis right now. This kid, curly-haired young kid, 21, 22 years old, comes up to me and he goes, hey, I read about you online. And I'm like, yeah, what did you read? He's like, he starts going through every story I just told you, championships, everything. And he's like, you run that wraparound business, huh? And the wraparound in 2016 is not wraparound today. Business has grown a lot since then. And he had done a lot of research on me. I was really surprised. All right. Now, keep in mind, I'm like 32 at this time. He's 22, something like that. 31, what is somewhere around that. And he says, yeah, I'm really trying to get into like the sports world. And, you know, is there anything I can do? Can I help? Anything. I was really impressed. He researched me and he came up to me and said, here's what you can do. I got to know him a little more. I said, why don't you come over to my house for dinner? We'll talk. And I remember he was shocked that I invited him over for dinner. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, you know, we eat food on the dinner table. We talk. It was a new concept for him at the time. I understood where he was coming from. So anyway, he came over, got to know him. I gave him some kind of internships type stuff. He was doing a good job. He was really enthused. He kept showing up. And I made him an intern. Travis Bowman, the intern, right? And this is a few years ago. So it was very much an intern relationship, and I would mentor him the best I could. You know, it just didn't work. He was trying to get himself a job. Again, long story short, this guy worked so hard, so passionately. He was so loyal, and we became really good friends. If you haven't figured that out yet, like a little brother to me. He really is like a little brother to me. I look at him like that all the time. I tell him that too, and he hates when I talk about this. But he's the little brother I never had. I was the youngest. He's my little brother, and he turned it into a job for himself. And I'm going to tell you the thing that I tell him all the time, because I don't think this is. I'm not telling you something I haven't told other people. I used to tell him this because he used to say like, you know, I don't know why me. Like, why did you do this? Not in a grateful way. He's like, you could have picked anybody. You know what I mean? And I said, because you looked me up and you stepped up and you asked me what I would needed. And he goes, but yeah, anybody could have done that. I said, but nobody did that. You did that. You're right. Anybody could do that. You did that. You stood up. You took the initiative. You looked up what we were doing and you came up to me and asked. No one else has done that at this time. Okay? You came up to me. That is a humongous deal. It's not normal. Okay? People tend not to do that. I'm sure I've met other people that wanted to work with us and have said nothing. I'll give you another example. She's listening to this. Caitlin Elizabeth Reese. All right? Met her at an Irish festival. Came up to me. Hey, are you that guy that does the We Live Hockey stuff with Travis? Yeah. She turned this into an internship for herself. And now really more of a family type information. Caitlin, I know you're watching. I don't know how you would classify this for yourself. She's a member of our team. Casey Owasco, also listening to this, came up to us. You need help with anything? It's rare. It doesn't happen that often. If you're listening to this, the moral of that story is don't be afraid to ask. You never know, okay? You never know when to chase your dreams, you got to take the initiative. It's not just going to sit in your lap. All these people took the initiative to ask. I notice that when I see it. Okay, it's a big deal. I wanted to tell you all that. So if you have dreams out there, I don't care how old you are, you're older than me, younger than me, ask. I got the job at the NHL. I saw a guy's business card on a desk. I took it. I emailed him. I didn't even know what he did. I said, I'm interested in working at the NHL. Can I meet with you? That with me. That's how my job at the NHL originated. Okay, I also had the resume for it, but I saw it. I took the chance. You got to do that, right? Jeff is saying, is that all I had to do? Jeff just annoyed me to the point I couldn't get rid of him. I'm not going to lie. Jeff Dwyer, he's laughing right now. No, Jeff was a very loyal friend, served in the Air Force. And the way I always worked with you, Jeff, because you're listening, was I was indebted to you. All right. I don't know if we've ever had this conversation. I'm pretty sure we have. But the reason why I invited you to be with the team, the reason why we drove together so much is because you were serving my country, our country, not just mine. All right. And I felt like, if all you want is hockey, at least I can provide you with that. Okay, I don't care what capacity anybody serves in the armed services. I have a tremendous amount of respect for anybody who serves our country in any capacity. In another podcast, again, that's one of the driving forces of how I do teamwork. I think the military is the greatest team on the planet. I do, right? So that was the least I could do for you. Need more tea. For serving our country, that was the least I could do, right? Not to mention you're a good friend, you're a loyal person. You're also a pretty good goaltender, unless I'm on the ice. I'm not going to let up on that, okay? I score on you at will if I want to. You made some good saves. I'll give you that, all right? You just reminded me, another thing about England is, for those of you who follow Hockey Tutorial, Chris Kabui, met him in England when his channel was just a small little channel. Now he's one of the top 3 influencers in the world when it comes to hockey. I remember we used to go shoot in Peterborough at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning English time, and they're 5 hours ahead of American time. Again, that's another podcast about influencers and what I've done with them. But good kid, again, good relationships, right? But yeah, that's kind of the abbreviated stories. I've gone for an hour and 15 minutes. I didn't think it would take that long, to be honest with you. Now I'm going to look back at some of your comments on here. Feel free to ask them. I'm going to probably wrap this up. The moral of the story, friends, is this. Before I do this, is it's so much the journey and not the destination. There's never been a point in my career, still to this day, where I knew what was going to happen. Right? I felt things that were going to happen, but the truth is you don't know what's going to happen, and the past doesn't matter. All that matters is right now in this moment, right? Living in the present moment. And the thing is that I'll tell you about my time playing is that, and coaching and all the stuff behind the scenes, was that the journey, the experience is really the gift. It's not the championships, and not my kid being born is a gift, but it's not the championships, it's the friendships. It's not the trophies, it's the memories, right? So when I think about all the stuff I just told you, my journey is far from over in hockey, far from over, but I try and enjoy the moment. And, when you get done playing, I can tell you this, what you miss is the locker room. You miss the guys, you miss the girls, you miss the team, right? And that's really what if I can impress anything upon you, that's what we all love. And this goes back to what I said about the people you work with at the NHL. You got to really enjoy the moment and know where you're at and not get too lost on thinking about the future or the past. You learn from the past and you move forward, right? And especially right now with what's going on in the world, I hear people say all the time, when's this going to end? You can't look at it like that. It ends when it ends. If I could tell you when it would end, I would. All right, but it ends when it ends. That's it. What can you do today? That's it. That's all you can do. So let me go through and read some of these comments. Okay. All the way back to the ones joking about me having hair. All right. Is that the Stanley Cup in the background? Mark wants to know. I have pictures of me with the Stanley Cup. I don't know if you're talking about the picture with the Devils, Mark, but actually I'm looking at a picture of me and Travis in the Stanley Cup right now. So I've been around the Stanley Cup multiple times, which is also a blessing to ever be around the Cup. It is as amazing as they say. Let's keep going here. It's a weird dynamic to be so close in age to your players. That was a very weird dynamic. My captain on that team, she's referring to when I coached Montclair State. I was 22. My captain was 21. Okay, so that was how close we were. In fact, I had played with some of the guys I was coaching. It was really weird, and we had to really be clear with each other about exactly the role that I was playing. Again, I was a raw coach at that time in terms of I had my philosophy really set. My philosophy hasn't changed. How I implement it, how I deal with people has changed a lot. Buckholz Brian says, I love the Hickey stories. I haven't told any Hickey stories, but I have told some hockey stories. I assume that's what you mean. Drew Brewer was very, very surprised about what I said about the people at the NHL. Yeah, it was a weird dynamic. I hope it's better there now. Let's keep going here. Drew also says that he's worked in places where people are bad and it's tough. Absolutely. Yeah, it's who you work with, not just what you're doing. And if you can get a good job with people you like, hold on to it for the rest of your life. You've won. Ray Carcillo, Lee and I also did play-by-play during his time for the high school teams in New Jersey. Yeah, so we were part of something called the Scholastic Play-by-Play Network, where Ray did play-by-play, and I did color commentating for the top high schools in New Jersey during my time, my last few years in New Jersey, which was kind of, I guess, really the beginning of a professional broadcasting operation. Again, we still do this to this day. Amazing. So let's keep going here. So apparently, Caitlin is just reminding me, when I saw Messier last fall, I told him that story about the guy at the door. Apparently, I think he liked that story. Messier Smiles from time to time, but when he doesn't smile, he has the most intense look on his face, and it's terrifying. Let's keep going here. So one of the best parts of hockey are the stories about the people. Absolutely. I mean, those are the best parts, right? Especially when you hear these old Stanley Cup winners talk about the team. Drew says, giving the South a chance for franchises was a cool move, though. Okay, so Drew, I'm guessing you're talking about Bettman putting hockey teams in the South. Are you being sarcastic, or are you being serious about hockey teams in the South? And then we'll address it. Jeff proudly stated that this is where he comes into the picture when I started about England. He was in Spain in 2014, and he got to England. Let's keep going here. Jeff continues to talk about England. You could read these if you want to. He was very happy when he was there. Let's keep going here. I need to pick up another copy. I lent mine to my assistant coach. Literally, Caitlin, if you need copies of my book, you just let me know. Okay, we'll send you one. You don't have to buy them or anything like that. The rest of you do. Mark Pollard says this. We travel 3 hours now to play on a decent rink. That's insanity, but shows how much you love the game. Again, for those who don't know, Mark is in Australia. He's drive 3 hours to skate. That's unbelievable. And God bless you for doing that. Jeff says, your motivation videos for the full month was epic. Yeah, so one of the things I did when I was coaching the team is I used to make these really humongous motivational, inspirational pump-up videos that I'd play the team right before they'd take the ice. And a lot of the players used to tell me that really got them in the mindset to win. Those were special. That's some of the best editing I've ever done. And no, I cannot share those. That was a team-only type thing. Mark says he travels 7 hours to play in the inline competitions. Well, that's crazy. Let's keep going here. So people want to know where Travis is. He's at home washing his tights. This is great because I know he's not listening. Tomorrow, or today, depending on when you're listening, tomorrow, Thursday, April 23rd, is Travis's birthday. Yes, now you all know. Tomorrow's Travis's birthday. I will find you if you don't wish him a happy birthday. Now you all know. Make sure you let him know it's a happy birthday. Don't tell him that I told you to do that. Do it because you want to do it. Tomorrow is Travis Bowman's 26th birthday. My little boy's all grown up. It's been a while. He's 22 to 26. I've known him a long time. That's, that's a long time, All right. He probably never showed up. Okay, so I still remember the arguments you and Chris would have in my car. Yeah, he's talking about Chris Kabui. That's Jeff Dwyer. So, yeah, Chris Kabui, Hockey Tutorial, and me, we are like a married couple when we're together. We fight a lot, but it's all out of love. It's all out of the respect for our art. Jeff actually is my another guy, Zach Loudon, who's another great friend of ours I met over in England. We played with him on the Royal Air Force team. He lives up in North Dakota. He's also out of the Air Force now. Another great human being. There's so many good people that you meet in the military. There's no way I could name them all. Okay, now I got a lot of people asking me for jobs. Mark wants to be my Australian distributor. You better be careful, Mark. I might take you up on that. You might not want that. All right. Maybe I might take you up on that. We'll talk about that. We have product in Australia, but I'm always not against getting more product out around the world. Caitlin says, I'm just going to read this. I have no idea what you're talking about. If you see a bald guy walking around a parking lot music festival wearing blade shades, walk up to him and ask if he's Lee for We Love Hockey. Just do it. That is essentially the origin story of Caitlin into We Love Hockey. That's what happened. She walked right up to me. Let's keep going here. Beyond thankful for you and Travis and the whole family. You guys know that. Jeff Dwyer says also, thank you. You opened the door. That's from Caitlin and Jeff. I'm thankful for you too. Thankful for you too in my life. You don't have to thank me. Jeff says, so many great times in championships and just hanging outside the rink. We spent a lot of time in Peterborough when I was in England. It was a good time. Ray says, I had to go do dishes when Lee showed his book. What'd I miss? Give me a break. I wasn't really selling it to there. That wasn't the point of that. All right? I mean, come on, man. This is an awesome picture. This is an awesome picture and a book. I'm just kidding, really. If you want to know more about that, ask me afterward. Caitlin says, Messier remembered the stories. That's great. Okay. Ray, where do you laugh? See, this is the problem with these comments. What are you laughing at? I just see that you wrote, ha, 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 ha. All right? The box behind me on my right, the cup. Yes, that is not the actual Stanley Cup. That is called the Stanley Stein, and it's a cup that looks like the Stanley Cup. I don't think they still sell those. I think they got tagged with copyright infringement. Funny story is I bought 12 of those when they came out, and I've given them away as gifts since then. But, yeah, that's the Stanley Cup, the Stanley Stein. It's also Han Solo, Frozen in Carbonite, several hockey players, Marty McFly, Wayne Gretzky. Never tell me the odds. There's a lot of stuff back there. Good eyes, looking that up. All right, let's keep going here. Tag him and post in the group all day. Yeah, that's what you should do. Mark Pollard says, bring it. Be careful what you wish for, man. Ray says he had to bust me about the book. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. I like this is why we're brothers. I kind of expected it. Oh, but you laughed about the Joker tights reference for Travis's birthday. Well, that makes me feel good because, see, Ray is a humongous Batman fan, and he would appreciate that joke. But it should be no surprise. Again, Geeks Who Like Sports airs every week. I am telling all of you, if you do like comic books and movies and stuff like that and sports, it's a really unique and awesome podcast. We have an unbelievable audience on that channel, Geeks Who Like Sports, and I am totally promoting it right now because I love doing that show with Ray. So check that out if you're interested. If it's not for you, totally get it. Mark says, thank you very much for today, taking my mind off problems. I understand, Mark. I don't want to talk about that unless you want me to, but yeah, we're all with you, man. Totally get where you're coming from. And Mark, yeah, if you want to be here's the thing. I guarantee you're the only person in Australia listening to this right now, so we'll talk. You have my word. But that's what I'm talking about. You asked. You never know. I'll see what we can do with that because it probably never hurts to have people in Australia. Ray says, our show kicks ass. I love it. I'll proudly say that. Look, I'm going on an hour and a half here, which I that time flew by. I'm really surprised. I got to tell you, I really appreciate that you listened to my story. I'm really appreciative of that. I'm always worried that I'm going to bore people with that, and I know you're going to tell me that it wouldn't, but it's not something I typically like to talk about. I said that at the beginning of the show, but it got to be honest with you, it feels good kind of telling you some of the stories, and it reminded me of some stories along the way, and it's kind of cool to relive that. And again, I'll tell you this, is that I meant what I said earlier about living in the moment. I think that's another reason why I don't like to look back too much because it's kind of past already. But my philosophy, I always say this, is like, reflect on the past, look to the future, and live in the moment. We did some reflection today, and I think that's okay. It didn't hurt, and I'm doing it in the moment, so it works for me. So yeah, I just want you to know that. Oh, and also everybody wants to remind you, Mark says the hockey never stops. For those of you who don't know, in Hockey Wraparound, we are giving away a free Hockey Wraparound every single day until hockey comes back in some form. We also have a lot of other prizes. Blade Shades will be getting in on that soon. Also, PVCK, also known as Puck, as a clothing line, is giving us stuff. In the coming weeks, all black hockey sticks, just hockey jerseys, a hockey sauce kit. We have a lot of people. It's all free. It's free to enter. You don't have to give me an email or anything at this moment. You just have to go online, share a picture of you enjoying the game, however you enjoy it. Use hashtag Hockey Never Stops, and it helps to tag at Hockey Wraparound just so we see it. We do search through these things, but the ones that tag us, we see them first. Totally up to you. Before we get done, I just want to say this to you guys again. We are entering, tomorrow is the 40th day of my quarantine, at least in this area, meaning I have not really left my house in 40 days. And I know different people out there are at different places. I know some people are going longer. I know some people are going shorter. I always say at the end of these episodes, one is thank you for letting me take some time out of my day so that I and you can get away from everything that's going on in the world that's annoying. That's number one. Number two is, it's been a while now. It's over a month. And yeah, look, I have good days and bad days too. Like I talk to a lot of you like one-on-one too. I'm always very optimistic and bubbly when you see me. It doesn't mean I don't have dips and I don't have tough times. I've got 2 kids here and they're 6 and 3. I have times where I'm going insane as well. I'm only telling you because I don't want you to think, that it's not affecting all of us, right? Like we all have the good times and the bad times with this, but the trick is we're all going through it together. I take a lot of solace in knowing that, I can lift my friends up and my friends lift me up. Sometimes people don't ask for it, but like this show is very therapeutic to me. All right, it really is. I mean, this really makes me feel good. And like I said, if that's shared, I'm humbled. I really mean that. I'm humbled that people are even watching this. I really mean that. Like I'm surprised. But it just goes to show you, like, we're getting through this together. One of the things that I think is a failure right now by our media is, and this is not political, and again, I can't speak to Australia or anybody else, but is there are 315 million people in this country, and I'd say 314 million of them are doing good things right now and helping each other out and doing the quarantine things that are very questionable in a lot of places to make sure that we don't get each other sick or whatever. That's amazing that 314 million people are cohering to making this a better situation. There hasn't been any anarchy yet. There hasn't been any violence that I know of on grand scales. We're doing this, right? We're doing it together. That's the story I wish that would be reported, that, a majority of this country and the world, let's be honest about it, has come together for the betterment of each other. And I don't care if that sounds sappy. I think it's amazing that we haven't discussed that. And we only see negative things all the time. Negative here, negative there. 314 million people in this country are doing the right thing, doing a good thing for each other. Different opinions, different ideologies, different political preferences, different religions, all of it. We're doing it together. Human triumph. I've always been amazed by that. And I do hope that one day we'll look back on this and say, like, wow, you know what? It sucked, but we did all right. Okay. We got a lot of people commenting different groups here that they want to see. Ray has put the Geeks Who Like Sports podcast in here. I expect you all to click on that if you enjoy that kind of stuff. I want to thank you all once again for being here tonight. My name is Elias. This is Puckdrop Live. Today's date was Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. We were talking about my life in hockey, which I never thought I'd be able to do. So I thank you all once again for joining me tonight. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you so much for listening to this on replay. Once again, we do this every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern-ish, live on Facebook, on We Live Hockey, Hockey Wraparound, and Elimination Cafe. And you can listen to the podcast on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, or most places where podcasts are broadcasted. If you need a link, just let me know. And then check out our website, welive.hockey, www.welive.hockey. You can see a lot of our content. You can see a lot of the daily shows that we do, the documentaries we do. One I want to shout out to right now is my goddaughter, Nina. We've asked her to name every NHL team by only showing her the pictures and the broadcast code. So, PHI for Philadelphia. And she's given some hilarious answers. If you get a chance to check out that series, we really appreciate you watching it. And all the great stuff that we do here at We Live Hockey, Hockey Wraparound, Elimination Cafe. I want to give a shout out to Travis once again. If, tomorrow, April 23rd, is his birthday, I got to give a big happy birthday to my little brother. I really mean this. We would not be where we are without you. You do impress me and annoy me on a daily basis. I mean, completely impress me and completely annoy me on a daily basis, which is exactly the definition of a younger brother. I should probably call my brother at some point about that sometime. Okay, listen, thank you so much for being here tonight. This is Lee. You guys are great. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next week. Make sure you keep being on topics. Also, feel free to send me topics if you have any, and I'll see you next week on Puckdrop Live. All right, this is the weird part where I got to navigate the screen and hit goodbye. All right, I found it. Take care.